Welcome to our Lenten service again. We pointed out, and we continue to point out, that the Sundays in Lent are Sundays in Lent and not of Lent. So they still remain festivals of the resurrection, but we do turn them down. So we don't use the Alleluia in the Gospel acclamation, and we will not have the canticle after communion, and we're not going to have a final hymn. We're going to say, for this period of time, let's conclude the service just with the blessing. So we will stop at the blessing. The service for today, the lessons, all focus again on this teaching time during Lent to help us develop again a renewed commitment to our being the children of God, the baptized people of God. The lessons all focus on, can we trust God? Do we really see in God the one who is worth committing our lives to? So that will be the focus of the worship as we move through it. I should take a moment again to let you know that we heard from our son Christopher. He does not have all of the results yet of his possibility of cancer. All the directions seem to be pointing in the direction of Hodgkin's lymphoma. That's not an absolute diagnosis just yet. You will find out on Tuesday whether that's true. What it will mean will be a series of probably 10 to 12 courses of chemotherapy, probably fairly high doses, to try to see whether they can take care of that. And if there are any masses, any lymph glands that have already a massive growth, then they will try to use radiation on those particular areas. All of that still is a bit up in the air because it hasn't been absolutely determined. We appreciate your prayers and would continue to solicit them. Now, if you will take a moment to say good morning to each other. As we make our journey through Lent, one of the classic questions that probably besets all of humanity is, does God really care for me? Is God friend or enemy? If the sun's shining and things are rolling along in life, we don't have much difficulty with that. We say, yeah, okay, things are fine. God's on my side. If something happens, such as Christopher having lymphoma, then we can say, uh-oh, I thought God was supposed to be taking care of us. What happened? So the issue gets to be, is God compassionate? Perhaps a way to look at this is to remember that, if my memory serves me, the Canadian woman skater who took the gold medal, I believe, or silver medal, excuse me, her mother died last Sunday of a heart attack, rather suddenly. And she continued to perform, and as was said any number of times by the commentators, the whole world's heart goes out to someone. We have a great deal of empathy and compassion for someone who suddenly has that kind of disaster. By contrast, Yesterday I saw a play at Taproot. It was C.S. Lewis, a rendition of C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. And the story is that a number of people are on this bus, which basically they all died and they're on their way to heaven. And they get there, and they're in the grass is very hard to walk on. It's sharp. It doesn't bend. They tried to pick a daisy, and you can't pick one. So you have to get used to this heaven where they are. And some of them are having second thoughts about whether they want to. And so they're wandering around, not quite headed toward the mountain, which is the symbol for God. And they all wander off. And then one of them comes back, and he meets an old girlfriend. And he is stunned and says, "What are you doing here? What about Jack? You murdered Jack. Why? How can you be here?" "Oh, it's all right now." He cannot buy that. If she's here in heaven, she is to be his guide to take him to the mountain. He can't deal with that. It's a portrayal of when things are fine, then it's okay when things are not fine. If someone, can we be compassionate for the person who offends us? What this has to do with our lessons is that here is God making a promise to Abram. And what can Abram offer? Is it because Abram is going to scratch God's back really nicely? Abram does nothing, well, I suppose, except complain that he doesn't see the promise being kept just yet. But God reiterates the promise. The stars, and then cuts the covenant to say, I am so committed to keeping this covenant, I am willing to be cut in half, to die, and he will do that. But in keeping the covenant, not because he breaks it. We tend to think that compassion, care, concern is to be exercised from a position of power and carried out with power. So the Pharisees come to Jesus in the gospel lesson and they say, you better leave. Herod's out to kill you. Jesus calls Herod a fox. Wasn't particularly a flattering term at that time in history. Foxes were considered, yes, cunning, crafty like a fox. We still use that kind of imagery. But foxes were a nothing threat. The lion, mountain lion or whatever, that was the king of beasts, and that was the one to be feared. And here's this little yapping fox. I'm not going to worry about him. But the Pharisees have our ideas. Oh, there's a threat. He has an army. He can do you real damage. Jesus says that's not what's going to happen. It's not possible for the prophets of God to be killed outside of Jerusalem. He is again talking about his life. He says, I'm going to perform miracles and do healings today, tomorrow, and the next day, and then I'm going to be on the road. I will go to Jerusalem.